But what's really important for us as men is that we step up and we say that we failed and that we're going to do something about it. And it's okay. And I want them to learn that so that they don't try to hide from their problems. They can go and tackle their problems when they come up. And it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to fail, because when you recognize that you failed, then you can make that correction. If we live in a state where we don't see any failure's got to be all around us.
Welcome to the Buchi podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is Buchi, just a matter of doing it.
Today we are joined by the head coach of the University of Illinois men's wheelchair basketball team, Matt Buchi. Coach Buchi has been coaching for over 15 years at Illinois, Alabama, and Oklahoma State. He led his teams to high school national championships in 2002 and 2003, as well as a college national championship in 2008. Coach Buchi was a Team USA women's assistant coach from 2009 to 2012. Before we hear from Coach, take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media at Buchi Podcast.
Coach, what's up, man?
Not too much, just basketball. Having a good time.
How are you? Oh, good. I'm just so glad that we got to do this.
I mean, I've just got done watching your conversation with Coach Neighbors, and I was like, oh man, that was so great. That's a really good conversation.
Like, I feel like he's the coach that I want to be one day. Like, I want to be like him.
Yep. Yeah. And I just got back this weekend. I was in Chicago for the PGC clinic. There was a coaching clinic up there, and he came up and he was speaking to the group. And so I got to talk with him and interact. And so it was really funny because a lot of things that he hit on during our conversation, he talked about this weekend. And I was like, oh, I remember that. So,
that's cool. That's cool. Yeah. Well, I want to first talk about just the connection that you and I had, because I've been looking forward to this one. We were at a PGC coaches, not really a clinic, more of a retreat. And it was the first one that I think PGC had done. And if they do it again, I want to encourage any coaches to look into that, because it really was a special environment. I mean, how often do you get to have a weekend with Mono and TJ and Sam and just sit there and really get to talk one-on-one? But that's where I met you. And I think your passion for the game was just infectious, and like I felt it from the very beginning, and then enjoyed our talk and got to learn more about you. So, man, thank you so much for coming on here with me.
Oh, it's a privilege to be able to do it, because again, I've been watching a lot of the recordings that you've been putting up, and I'm like, wow, this is kind of cool to be a part of this crowd. I like it. This will be a fun conversation. And it's really unique too, because wheelchair basketball is basketball, but it's a whole different thing in the same aspects. So it'd be fun to, share what I know about my sport and what we do.
And that's what I love too, was learning about some of the similarities, and then some of the new things and the ways that you've been able to adapt drills and different techniques and things to fit the differences in your game. I just found that fascinating with our little talk that we had outside the hotel.
Yeah. I mean, coming to PGC, the culture is the big thing for me. It's just like that. It doesn't matter what sport you're doing. It works across the board when they put together just people working together and bonding, and also the sticky language that they use is really great. And I'm constantly looking for sticky language now that they've talked about it. But ultimately the drills and me going to PGC or any of these coaching clinics, it's about like basically solving a puzzle. I get an opportunity to look at this, go, okay, how does this work, or how can this not work for wheelchair basketball? And with our sport, we don't have any lateral movement, because you're in the wheelchair. You can't go side to side. You've got to be able to rotate around. So that actually takes a lot of the drills and go, okay, well, that may not work, but it might work some other way.
Yeah, and I think that's what, as coaches, what we should be doing anyway, is you look at a drill and you try to figure out, okay, how will this really work for us and what we do? But then you take that to a whole other level with the differences between the games.
Yeah. And it's fun with those coaching clinics, the conversations I get to have with coaches, because I feel like there's a separation when it comes to the sport or maybe the level of coaching. But when we were in one of those big meeting rooms and we were talking to Coach Neighbors, we asked him about what is the hardest thing that you do in your job? Like, what's the thing that you worry about the most? And he said it was decision making, is that my decision affects 30 plus people in my group. And so that takes a toll on me. And I'm sitting back going, okay, I'm not the only one. That's great to hear. And then the rest of the coaches, we talked about it. We're like, yeah, everyone is feeling that way. Is that, yeah, when you're in a coaching position, you feel a lot of responsibility. And it's so great to hear that even people that we look up to feel the same feelings that we do. And I'm like, okay, it's almost like gives me a feeling of normalcy, right?
Yes.
Like, cool. All right, we're good. We're doing the right thing.
Coach, I love that question. What's the hardest thing? Because you've already, now that you're within this process, you realize I send out a list of questions, and those are the questions that I want to. I don't care who I'm talking to. I want to know the answers to those. Like if I was to go to a clinic, my perfect clinic would be one person talking about all of these questions and answering them.
Yeah.
But that is one that I'm going to add because, and I'd be interested to see. Do the answers change depending on the level that coach is at? You know, the D1 level, all the way down to the small private school, high school level like me, would our answers be different? Coach, I'm going to ask you, what's the hardest thing about your job?
Well, I think the hardest thing for me in a college setting is for recruitment. And I think it's mostly based on what school I'm located with. So I work at the University of Illinois. And our school is a high academic school, or Big Ten university, and it's difficult academically to get in. And with some of the student athletes that we have that have physical disabilities, they may not have the grades to be able to get there compared to some of my counterparts that I might be battling with in recruitment. So not only am I trying to encourage these athletes to be able to come to our school and our program, but the academic side is something else that we're pushing, which we ultimately want to get the best academic players into our program too, because they've got to graduate and, move on with their lives in that way too.
What are some of the big schools that you mentioned kind of that you're competing against for players? Who are those schools?
Yeah. So we have 14 college programs on the men's side. The majority of them are in the Midwest, and there are a variety of different divisions. So again, we're the only Big Ten university that has a program, but big schools in the South is University of Alabama, Auburn University, Texas Arlington are some of our big schools in the South. Missouri, just nearby us, Mizzou has a program, and then there's some other smaller schools that kind of stretch out a little bit further. So Arizona and Eastern Washington University out on the West Coast. We have a new program now that's City University of New York. That's a new program that started up, but it ultimately depends on the program starts based on somebody being in that school that's interested and excited about trying to bring adaptive sports to that area. And then it kind of grassroots blows up from there.
Are you involved in helping to grow it more across the country? Like, because I would imagine even though you're competing against these schools for players and for championships, you also want the popularity and the sport to grow. And so how involved are you with that?
Yeah, well, I think our program has always been a resource for other college programs of like how to do it. With our wheelchair basketball program, we're the oldest collegiate program in the United States. So our program started in 1948. And so a lot of the other schools started based on some kind of framework of what we've had here at Illinois. But we've also made some adjustments even in our college division where we'll have teams come in and we consider them emerging teams. So the first 3 years, maybe 4 years, depending on what they need, we'll be a little bit more flexible about what student athletes are on their program. So they could technically have community members that are around the same college age that want to be participating, or what we would have is some people that don't have a physical disability at all could play in the team, just to have numbers enough for them to play games. And then that coach can recruit and tell other students that are potentially coming in, we have a program, rather than we may have a program in the future. We don't know. That's hard to recruit to.
Yeah, that's right. I think throughout our talk, we'll get to discuss some of the similarities but differences between our sports, but some things like who you're learning from, culture, activities, things like that. It doesn't matter what sport we're talking about. We can talk about football and it would still carry over. So what's one of the best things that you've borrowed lately?
So Coach Neighbors, he had a star passing and catching drill that he just threw up on his YouTube channel a little while ago. And I was reflecting back on some of the drills that we do normally for warm-up drills. And, a lot of the times it's those coaches are just like, well, these are the drills we do for warm-ups. So just do those every time we have a game. And there's no real effort or like thought process behind it. And so just kind of sitting back and watching, going, okay, well, what we currently do for a warm-up layup drill doesn't really reflect what we're going to want in the game. So how do we incorporate something else that's going to reflect it more? And we've got to do better at passing, because in wheelchair basketball, not being able to have the lateral movement to recover and try to grab a pass, it's got to be on point in the chest to be able to be in a shooting pocket. So incorporating the star drill, I made an adjustment to it and called it game time layups. And we just made an adjustment where we were putting the guys in certain positions that were very much game-like shot spots, where they would have to catch, show shot, and then send it to the next person, and had them rotate through. And, adding a new drill like that always gets the athletes excited that there's something new to pay attention to.
What are some ways that you could take something like that, and do you make it competitive within practice?
Yeah, so we had our main focus on passing. And we talked about passing, it's got to be in the strike zone. So just being from below the shoulders, above the hips, between the shoulder blades, that zone right in front of the core was like, okay, that's where the pass has got to be at. And with wheelchair basketball, we've got people with different disabilities and levels of ability to move. So you have some guys that might have an injury that's really high in the chest. When they get a ball outside their cylinder, their body starts to fall and they have to pick themselves up. So if you want to and make them more successful, you got to give them a pass right to the chest to make it work. So we started calling balls and strikes. And so the guys started counting the strikes and had a number running. And then when somebody threw it outside, the ball, and then everyone would just have to reset the number back to 0. And we'd start to count again. And the guys really got into it, where they started evaluating each other harder than I would have been evaluating them. It's like, it was a good catch, but it was outside the cylinder. Nope, it's a ball. Let's move on. Let's go. So yeah, we've made it a competitive drill now that we've got a number up there for our game time layups is, whatever number we're trying to hit in a row.
So it sounds like passing is just a really important skill in your game, as it is in ours. And what part does dribbling have in it? Because I'm trying to think of like how individual skill work is just such a big part. And Coach Neighbors talked about that too. I mean, everything basically is skill work. What part does the bounce, the dribble play in your game?
Sure. So talk a little bit about the wheelchair basketball rules compared to our able body rules. For wheelchair basketball, you get 2 pushes, and then you've got to dribble the ball, like a 2-step rule, and a 3 push is a travel. But a push is technically touching your wheels. So if I had the ball in my lap and I took 1 push and then I grabbed my wheel to turn, I'm kind of stuck on that push, kind of like stuck on a pivot foot. So if I were to take my hand off the wheel and try to touch the other wheel again, that's the travel and it's going the other way. But there's no double dribble rule in wheelchair basketball either, because you don't have the lateral movement to get out of there. You've got to be able to just put the ball back down to the floor. But with those rules, then now what we're trying to do is figure out how do you change direction and pace with the dribble, knowing that you've also got to use your offhand to be able to move the chair at the same time. So there's a lot of skill-based work where we're doing ball handling, which it's a location-based thing in the chair. You don't want to go too far out wide, or you might hit your big wheel too far out in front. You might hit the foot plate and send it out front. So it's got to be an even 45 right there at the small caster in front of the chair. But then adding to that, can you get behind the back? Because you'll have a defender in your face. You might have to change positions behind you so that you're able to change directions with your outside hand and push. Bounce stops is another big thing too we talk about, where if I'm in full speed rotation, I'm heading really fast to the defender and I need to stop, the ability to bounce the ball, and while the ball is in air, hitting the brakes and then catching it to be able to make your next move is a standard skill that we teach young kids, because they've got to be able to control themselves and the ball at the same time.
Can a majority of players do that action that you just said? Because it sounds to me, it sounds really hard.
Yeah. And I think for most that have never played wheelchair basketball and we get them in a chair, the first thing we want to do is they want to put the ball directly in their lap and then just start pushing. But if you were to put the ball in your lap and have a defender on you, they're just going to tap it out of your lap and just go with it. So being able to stay active in pushing while dribbling is really important. And being able to bounce stop so that you don't run into a player and create a charge is really important too, because in wheelchair basketball, the chair is a part of the body, so it accounts for the same type of fouls as you would for our able-bodied counterparts. So if a defender's stopped in the key and you run into him and you flip yourself over, that's a charge on you and it's heading the other way.
Wow. So in practice, what's the breakdown from individual skill, whether it's working on your handle, your passing, your shooting, but then also then your competitive team play? How to kind of take us through how you map out a practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So coach here previously, it was very good at building a minute by minute practice plans. And that's what I always learned under, is trying to organize it that way. But we also have a structure of building from small individual and small group work, building up to the 5-on-5 at the end of the practice. So we try to do that. Our practices are 6:30 to 8:30 in the morning, Monday through Friday. So we got early rise.
That's early. Now the nice thing is 8:30. Golly, I have the rest of my day, but that's early.
Yeah. Well, and so then at 8:30, what we also do for about 30 to 45 minutes is we'll have a couple of the athletes stay after what we call small group. And they get to work on individual skills that's outside of our normal game plan, but it's something they need to be working on. And they get one-on-one time with me and my assistant coach. So they get to get their individual work done there. So it's kind of a full circle thing that they start with small skills, building up to small group, large group, and then back to individual before we wrap the day up. But yeah, we practice 5 days a week, Monday through Friday there. And then the athletes are also required for our lifting training, that we do lifting 3 times a week with our strength and conditioning.
What do workouts look like? Weight workouts look like?
Sure. We've got a really great wheelchair accessible gym facility that's in my building, because my office is in disability services. So we have a wide variety of disability services for the university. But we have a fully accessible gym, and we've got a full-time physical therapist and athletic trainer here. And our strength and conditioning plans are actually wrote by our track coach that does wheelchair track. And he coaches a lot of the athletes right now that are winning golds in the Paralympics. And they just got done doing the Chicago Marathon, and the top 4 women finishers were all his athletes. And so it was like number 5 and on was the rest of the world, but his athletes were on top. So super creative guy, making sure that we're working on all the different groups that they need for balance and also strength. But we also know too that our athletes, when they get done, they still need their shoulders to be able to live, because they're going to be pushing these chairs on a daily basis. And before my time, the guys that would play here, their shoulders would just be shot because we would go full force all the time. And it's like basically putting a ton of work on your knees, and then you have to have knees replaced, but your shoulders, you're constantly using them when you're pushing in a chair.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Just something I never thought of before. So obviously, like any college program, you guys are working really hard and to come together and try to win a championship. But then, my experience with college basketball, the ability to play it maybe overseas, G League, NBA, if you're a part of that elite group. I mean, obviously you have Olympics that they can be a part of, but then where else can they continue to play and be competitive with this?
Sure. So the United States has the National Wheelchair Basketball Association, which is the NBA for wheelchair basketball. Yeah. And beyond it being like the top league, it's 3 different divisions for adult leagues, and then they have their kids leagues. It's all involved. So some of our athletes, after they graduate from our program, may continue with recreational sport at one of those levels, which the D1 level is that itself, a D1 level. That's the top players. D3 are kind of the old guys that just really enjoying pushing around and having a good time. But some of our athletes, their goals is to finish their degree and then try to go overseas to play pro. There is not a professional league here in the States, but there are several pro leagues in Europe. And many of the guys are going over to Germany or Italy or Spain, places like that have professional teams that they get to play. It's not the big bucks like some of our able-bodied counterparts, but what's really cool is they get an opportunity to kind of take those early 20s and experience international travel, playing ball, and living the dream,
Coach, playing pro is playing pro. I don't care where it is. And this is speaking from somebody, as we're talking, I'm sipping out of my Icelandic coffee cup here. Coach, I played in Iceland for 1 year. Yeah. I'm not going to tell you how few kroners that I made, but to make extra money one time, I was a Saturday morning, I moved coffee grounds from one truck to another truck just to make some extra cash. So like, I get it. I mean, if you love the game enough, you're willing to go anywhere and to make any amount of money to do it.
Sure. Well, and these guys now have access to the NIL deals. This is something that's fully opening up the opportunities for college students that used to be like, oh, it's a college student. You live off your college money and you eat ramen or whatever. But these guys have opportunities to interact with organizations and companies here locally and be sponsorship deals.
That's a great point.
It's so cool to see that they have these opportunities. But then also the flip side of it is we want to make sure that they're prepared for these conversations and opportunities. So really having strong discussions with them about who they're interacting with and what the process may look like, which is totally new for me too. I don't really know where we're going with it.
That was going to be my follow-up was, so do you feel like now a part of your program, because I have heard at other programs, they literally have someone on staff and their job is to help athletes through that. I mean, is that, so you feel like that's now a part of your job, is you got to help them through almost like not an agent, but you're helping them through these conversations in these deals.
Yeah, there's some regulations involved with the NIL of like, we can't reach out to the organization and basically sell one of our athletes to them. But
that's a good rule. That's a good rule.
Right? I know. So when they build that conversation, like when one of our athletes maybe interacts with a program or a company that's here locally, we want to make sure that they are having conversations with us and talking about, what is the identity that they're going to be presenting in there, and understanding that when they go and represent themselves, they're also representing our program at the same time. It's got to make sure that it's the right way of doing it. But it's just so new that we're just it's kind of weird. It's kind of Wild West stuff right now that whoever takes full advantage of it can really make a lot out of it.
Coaches, the Jamodi podcast is powered by Buchi. What's your BSA score? The Buchi Skills Assessment is the only verified skills metric endorsed by the NAIA, NJCAA, and a growing number of NCAA coaches to discover and develop the best talent for your team. This 4-minute, 40-shot test can be taken free today on the Buchi mobile app. Elevate your game. I know your ties with PGC and also, Coach Neighbors, you mentioned following him. What are some of the coaches and leaders that you follow closely?
Yeah. So PGC, Coach Neighbors is definitely a big one on there. For me, for wheelchair basketball, it's really interesting that there's not that many standout coaches for information like PGC is. So I'm kind of hoping that I can build that for a lot of our coaches in our
do you have clinics? Are there any clinics that you have that are for wheelchair basketball? That you're maybe running or starting?
Sure. So the University of Illinois, we run, most of the university programs run summer camps for kids. So we'll run basketball camps there. We run 2 camps here. One that's a individual skills camp that's for younger age. And then we run a camp that's called a premier camp, which is basically run like a national team training camp. We'll bring in 30 athletes and we'll run them at a high level and run different skills. But beyond that, what we also do, myself and our women's coach, Coach Wheeler, we'll run a coaching clinic in conjunction with those camps. So we'll bring coaches in from high school level, or they could be coming from international, and they come to the program. And in between meal breaks, we're talking about different coaching skills and trying to build them on that. So University of Illinois has always been that light that's trying to light up other programs, and we continue to try to do that during camps.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you mentioned your club being program, but I thought you used club, but I don't want to say that if you didn't.
Yeah, it is our program. They're all clubs, and when it comes down to it, we have a bunch of teams in the college division, and only 2 of them are actually associated with their athletic departments.
Okay.
So the rest of us are a variety of different positions. We have some that are fully campus rec. And then we are kind of a hybrid where we have some relationship with our athletic department, but we're mostly a disability services resource for students. So you come to the University of Illinois as a student with a disability, you would get access to resources with academics, with mental health, and also with physical education. So you get physical support with wheelchair basketball.
So you mentioned your program being around since the 40s, right? 1940. Yeah. Why do you feel like, maybe it's you. Maybe we've been waiting for you to somebody with your level of passion, love for, talking hoops and meeting with coaches to do something like that. But well, let me ask you this. Do you feel like there's a reason for the slower growth in it? Or or what is the reason why there hasn't been that John Wooden-esque type coach to come through and like you kind of said a second, a PGC term, be a light?
Yeah. I think that there has been, but because our community is so small and they feels like there's a separation between the two, not many of our coaches cross that line and go into the able-bodied side. But I look at it as like we're probably missing out on a ton of drills and activities that we don't do because you only know so much when you're in your own echo chamber. Yeah. And when I've had coaches in the past, we've had incredible coaches here at Illinois that have really worked on the fundamentals. And really the former coach of mine, Coach Mike Frogley, he was a national team coach for Team Canada and won multiple gold medals with them. Like things that he would run, all the other college programs would run because that's what Coach Frogley would do. And so they would all run that stuff. But outside of our world, there wasn't many people that understood the impact that was happening on our sport. And I just think it's important for us to reach out across to the basketball side because not many do. And it would be awesome to see some collaboration between the two.
Yeah.
The exciting thing for me is when I share about wheelchair basketball on platforms like yours, I'm hoping that there's coaches that are listening that are a part of a school or a program and they know somebody that is in a chair that maybe doesn't participate in sports or doesn't have an outlet to it. And this can somehow be a connection to go, you know what, I want to talk with so-and-so and see if they know about wheelchair basketball, they know about adaptive sports, and maybe we can get them connected that way. Because there's over 200 different wheelchair basketball programs across the country. So it doesn't matter where you are in the country, there are options for people with disabilities.
I love that. And I think it was Jordan Peterson that said, like, assume that everybody that you're talking to can teach you something. And that, I mean, I just, when I was meeting with you, again, just kind of captivated. One, it was you, like your passion. I think what is impressive with people is, or that kind of draws you in, it's that authenticity. When you can really feel like they're the real deal. So I felt that about you, but then I just found myself being fascinated with, what are the differences? What are things that work for you that we don't do, and vice versa. So I agree with you. You've obviously found with going to PGCs that there's things that you can learn, but I have to imagine that there's things that I can learn as well.
Yeah. I'm always a student of the game. I have to be a student of the game all the time. And if there are people that are around you that also are students, it just increases the energy so much. And that's why any opportunity that can be around the PGC guys and ladies, it's like, you got to be involved. They make me a better coach because they challenge what I'm thinking. And they also remind me of the things that I have as my core values that I get lost in when you get lost in the weeds of like, I just got to figure out this defensive set and we're going to be okay. But they bring you back to what are we really coaching for? It's about them. It's about those athletes. We got to take care of them.
Coach, well said. Like, I think it's exactly what I felt like when I observed my first PGC session as a coach. It was like coming home. It was like, yes, this is why I'm doing this. Man, why have I forgotten that? Like, and a reminder of getting back to those basics and the why behind it. But I don't think I've ever heard anybody say it that well. So I'm going to, in some ways, be stealing that going forward, or borrowing. That was good.
And that's what we do as coaches too, right? We borrow/steal what we got. But those little reminders are so, like, they hit so hard because it's things that you already know, but you just didn't think about them. And Coach Sam, when we were at this last coaching clinic, he was talking a little bit about, best practices of practices. And he mentioned something in there about the idea of the athletes. It's not important about thinking about what they're going to do next for pass, dribble, shoot. What's important is the other players that don't have the ball, what they're going to be doing. And we think so much about when the person has the ball, what are you going to do next? But I'm like, there's 4 other people out there that have to make decisions too in order to make that person work. I was just sitting there taking the notes going, whoa, yeah. You've got what you currently are thinking about. It's ×4 of the people that need your focus without the ball.
I'm thinking of, what are your thoughts on this? I'm thinking of taking there's a couple questions that have to deal with culture. And I think it was Porter Moser at Oklahoma. There's this little 30-second clip of him saying, yeah, our culture is really, really important. And he's like, oh, well, now that I said that word, I know I'm going to be on all of these memes about culture and how we say that word all the time. And then he did this kind of funny thing. But I feel that way about, I want to know about programs culture. I want to know what people are doing to build it. But it's almost like, I think I need to take that word out and just say, what are your favorite standard building games? Or just standards just sound better now, but what are some of your favorite culture building activities?
So I think culture is still big, but it's how we frame what culture is. And I think it's a ability to bond, and the way college young men need to bond is by allowing them to drop egos and be vulnerable. And that, when I'm able to put together an activity that allows them to be vulnerable and succeed as a group, that's always going to stick. And for me, my second year coaching, this is my 10th season with the men's team. My second year, I was trying to find what's some big splash at the beginning of the year that we can make a huge platform base of our culture. And we're very fortunate here in Illinois that there is a 4-H campground site owned by the university. It's about 45 minutes outside of here. It's been some cabins up in the woods. And it's like perfect.
That's awesome.
It's wheelchair accessible for us too. So it worked out perfect that way. And it feels like whatever the movie you can think of where the summer camp is, where it's like a big room full of bunk beds that are all lined up. It's exactly that. So we get there, and a lot of the freshmen that come in, I'm like, pick a bunk. We got activities in 10 minutes. And they're like, I don't know what's going to happen. And a lot of these kids are not used to being out in the woods and being in nature. So that's good experience. But we just spend a whole weekend working on team activities, whether they are fun activities to bond, thinking activities, challenging activities. But beyond what we work on and what goals we talk about, we always finish the first night around the bonfire. And we'll get around the circle there. We get to talk a little bit and share some things. But then there's always a point where I step in and I pass around a piece of paper and pens to all the guys. And I say, I want you to really reflect on what is the biggest thing that you're worried about this season? What's the thing that's holding on to you the most? Write it down on the piece of paper. And once everybody writes, this fire is our place of safety. Where we're around the circles, our fires are safety. If you want to share with the group, you can, because when you share, your teammates are going to let you know how they're going to support you through this. And we get guys that share big things. And it's amazing every year where I'm like, they're just going to say, I'm worried about this or that or school or whatever. But big family stuff, big life stuff comes out. And when they feel fully comfortable, I ask them, if you feel like you're trusted by your teammates and supported by your teammates to take care of this problem, burn it in the fire and let's get rid of it. It's no longer a problem for you. And the physical thing of burning that, you could see the weight just kind of drop off. And that next morning, this crew is a totally different crew. They wake up that morning, we get in activities, and they just feel so relaxed and bonded as a group. And then we're off and running. And it's so wild that we've had incredible highs and incredible lows on and off the court. But if I call any of the guys that I've coached in the past and go, tell me some things you remember from playing here, the first thing they come up with is the camping trip. Oh, the camping trip is so great. You're still doing that, coach, right? You're still doing it? I'm like, yep, we're still doing it. And it's a never-ending positive response for us.
Man, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I love the way you said, because you're right on the money. We need to put them in a position where we strip their egos down, right? Isn't that's what you said? Because I don't care. It's not male or female. We're all guarded. We're all insecure, and we're all going to hold back, especially if we feel like there's some type of danger of getting hurt, whether it's emotionally, probably not physically, but emotionally within a team. and that insecurity comes up. So you're right. It doesn't, I love that activity. I like the idea of taking them away, out of their comfort zone where they're together. They have to rely on each other. So it's like, I love that idea, but it doesn't really matter what the activity is if you can achieve what you said at the beginning, which is get them vulnerable, tear their egos down. That's great.
Yep. And what's really great that's been paying dividends is when we have problems throughout the season and maybe we're on the road or we're here on campus or something, I got myself a stuffed kids fire pit, like a little bonfire where you would bake s'mores or whatever. So anytime we got some breakdown, we have a team meeting and I've got this little fire pit that we all circle around and they're like, oh, coach is trying to get us vulnerable again. Like they just know it's coming, that we've got to talk about.
Not again, serious. Coach. It's not happening again.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's been great. And there have been moments where we're like, oh, we have to have a serious talk. The guys will come in and be like, hey, coach, I think we need a bonfire talk. I'm like, awesome. Let's take care of it. Let's do it. Because they know that that's a moment where we can share our true feelings and know that the majority of the guys are not going to take them immediately personal, which is always a work in progress when it comes to that stuff. Yeah.
Another, I think, a great tip for coaches that you said is, and neighbors kind of, I refer to this too, about asking former players, what worked well, like what are some things that we need to keep doing. And I think that's one, hey, what, whenever you're texting or talking with former players, what's something that you really, miss or remember, enjoyed that you want to make sure we're still doing? Like, that's a good question to ask former players, because it's amazing how, 5 or 6 years ago, I used to take our guys through a Living Without Regret series throughout the season. We would take 15, 20, sometimes 30 minutes of practice time. I had a PowerPoint. It was really the beginning of my PGC directing days. So I was all about PowerPoints and having everything there. But, I would take practice time, and there are these 12 characteristics that, we would go throughout the year. And I felt like, man, if you guys really embrace these 12, then you'll live a life of no or little regret, which is the goal. But I got away from that. And I don't know if it was wanting to have them, up at the school with less time, or wondering in myself, like, did they really enjoy that or embrace that? Or was that a waste of time? And so maybe I need to go back and ask, hey, what did you think of that? Or what did you think of these things that we used to do? And should we still be doing that? Oh, that's a great nugget there, Coach.
But the thing about vulnerability is that we can teach it, but we also have to be vulnerable ourselves. And we have to show at some moments that we can be vulnerable, and it's also a strength. And I'm speaking from exact experience right now, because this preseason, I've got an incredibly talented team this year. And I've got a lot of veteran guys that are getting ready to finish their last year here with me. So I want to make the most out of it. And naturally, I'm an offense guy. Like, if I'm going to be talking basketball, I love talking the offensive side of things.
Let's go.
But our guys really need also that help on the defensive side. So it's like, I'm going to step outside my comfort zone. I'm going to do some research. I'm really going to do some thinking and try to put together a plan that's really going to help us get stronger defensively. So I had all these plans in place, and I'm trying to implement them in practice, and it's just not going well. And we just had this last practice where I had so many questions and frustration from them. I was like, this just kind of falling apart around me, and was just not what I wanted. And I could see the body language that they were just not enjoying practice. And that was hard for me to see, because I'm like, I ultimately want you guys to have a great time. It's supposed to be fun at practice. So I took the weekend, and it was just perfect that it happened just before the PGC clinic. So I went to PGC and got to share with a bunch of coaches and talk about it. And this morning's practice, we didn't go to the gym, but we went over to the pancake house over here, and we all had breakfast, and I had an apology breakfast with the guys. And the first thing I said to them was, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I made a mistake and I failed at something. But what's really important for us as men is that we step up and we say that we failed and that we're going to do something about it. And it's okay. And I want them to learn that, so that they don't try to hide from their problems. They can go and tackle their problems when they come up. And it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to fail, because when you recognize that you failed, then you can make that correction. If we live in a state where we don't see any failure, failure's got to be all around us.
Is that hard for you to do, or is it something like leading up to it, and then after, how did you feel?
Yeah, I was very nervous for the whole weekend, thinking about it and getting prepared for it. Was nervous about the whole idea, but I know that I've done the work with these guys on the culture side of things,
Yeah.
that they're going to understand where I'm coming from and they're going to appreciate it. So when I gave the talk to them, they 100% understood, but they also wanted to make sure that they had their side to speak as well, and said, yes, we agree that this is not working and we don't want to go this path. And I was like, that's okay. We'll work on a different path. And then one of my guys kind of came out and was like, yeah, I didn't think this was how the breakfast was going to go. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, I just didn't think it was going to be like this, but this is really good. This was productive. I'm like, okay, well, that's good to hear too. So yeah, being productive with the guys.
The Jamodi podcast is powered by Sideline Interactive. Sideline Interactive is the leading manufacturer for high-quality, innovative scoring tables and LED video display boards that help coaches and schools bring more excitement to fans, create huge fundraising opportunities, and make their jobs easier. Visit sidelineinteractive.com to check out their amazing products.
What's one thing that makes your program different?
I think it's the push of making these guys better men and not just basketball players. And with my recruiting, a lot of my recruiting shaves off a lot of people that I've been talking to. If they come at me and they're like, how much scholarship money you got and how much playing time am I going to get? I go, it's been really great talking to you. You know,
what a horrible way to start that conversation.
Terrible. Yeah. But if there's people that can come in and go, Coach, what are you looking for out of this next year's team? And how can I be a part of it? How can I impact it? Man, yeah. I'm circling and highlighting this guy's name. So I think those are big areas that I'm pushing there culture-wise, and that when I have an opportunity to challenge them, they always seem to step up to the challenge because they rely on each other. It's very few opportunities where these guys just kind of collapse under the pressure. And I think that's ultimately how we've built our culture. What we do here differently is that we're building great people, and we're thinking about it outside of basketball, because even if they did go play pro overseas, they're going to come back and they're going to be in the working world and they're going to start families. And I want to make sure that they are a good representative of our program because they're a good person. So that's ultimately where we're at. And we'll do silly fun stuff as team groups where none of my guys know how to really work with tools. And so one of the years we did a fundraiser for Habitat for Humanity was called Raise the Woof. And it was people building dog houses that then would be auctioned off and the money would go to Habitat for Humanity. And I'm a bit of an amateur woodworker on the side too. So I brought all my tools in and we were like, all right, let's go and let's build a doghouse. And one of the guys had a plan together while the others were like, all right, what do I do? And they gave each other tasks to be able to build it and everything. And we put it together. And what was ultimately really cool was the award that we won was Best Spirited, because the guys showed it off and they had such a great way of presenting it that the people watching it were just like, oh, you guys are awesome. We love it.
I think a great compliment of a team would be they never fell apart under pressure.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes I would imagine with not just the positive culture things that you do, but also through your training and through practice, you put them in positions intentionally to where there is pressure and where those moments could come up. How often as coaches, I think, are we so protective over them, maybe their confidence, or that we really just step in like a parent and we rescue them out of danger before they actually have to go through anything and they're tested. And then the big moments, we're shocked and we can't believe where they did fall apart, or the culture did collapse. They did turn on each other and with the blame game. So I would imagine you're pretty intentional throughout practice and throughout the year to create that type of environment.
Yeah, it depends on the season and how you're doing it, because early in the season, you're building the foundation of their confidence, right? And then once you get into the middle part of the season and they've got some games in, now we test some areas and we push them a little bit. And at the end, now we're just trying to challenge them and see how far we can get them to go. Last week we had a practice that was kind of a rough one and they just didn't feel success at the end of the practice. And I was reminding them of what I had heard about the rule of thirds. And the rule of thirds training is that when you're training, a third of the time should feel fantastic, a third of the time should feel okay, and the third of the time it should suck. And if you don't have thirds of those three and everything feels great, you're not challenging yourself enough. And if everything sucks, you're overwhelmed and you're overworking and you need to bring it back. And so it's okay to have a practice or a session or a game or something suck, but just know that there's going to be some other good that's going to be followed behind it. And that's just the path of what we do throughout the season.
That's freeing for coaches, right? To hear.
Yes.
Because I think sometimes we can have a bad practice and then either with ourselves or our coaching staff think, man, we're going the wrong direction right now. Like this thing, what's happening? A week ago, we felt great. And now if we are rising and falling, I think that's a great reminder for us as well.
Absolutely.
What's your favorite style of play to teach? You mentioned offense, which you and I are aligned in that. So what's your favorite?
Yeah. So with wheelchair basketball, it's kind of interesting that there's different dynamics to the sport of how you're moving people in certain places. And one of the interesting things with PGC is working with Rick Torbett and his read and react offense and his motion work with players. And a lot of the reads and plays that he has players passing the ball away and then entering and exiting the key through different locations. And for us, for wheelchair basketball, a person in a chair entering a key through the baseline and coming back out, just not going to happen. Chairs are too wide and people are going to stop you from those places. So we have to manipulate that a little bit and really create 2-on-2 small games on either side of the key and an interacting point person that's at the free throw line and get some plays going that way. And you can see a little bit from the board behind me. I've got some of the Rick Torbett-esque players there, but we've got them into these kind of like trapezoid angled sides because these wheels that you have there have got to use them for picking in angles. So we try to get them set up in plays that have two main games on both sides and one at the top, and how you get them to interact that way. So I love systems and strategies and being people in locations. Space in wheelchair basketball is incredible. And in basketball in general, having a lot of space makes it difficult to defend.
Yeah.
But imagine having the space and then the players are not able to change direction laterally. And they also have to do everything in the chair. If you got a guy that's a great three-point shooter and you're able to swing the ball efficiently, space kills defenses. And so I love swinging the ball around, and I've got highlight reels of different sports teams at different levels that swing the ball quickly and go, how incredible would it be if in a 30-second shot clock, we've got at least 12 passes before we're even thinking about shooting. Those defenses have no idea what to do in matchups. So yeah, it's always a fun challenge for me, and having these guys understand my system being a lot of veterans, they start to get creative and go, well, what do you think about us doing this or doing that, and having different reads in place? It's a fun time with these guys.
So would you say that it's more concepts and action based, like within a continuity, or do you really just go set after set after set of plays or actions?
Yeah. So with this group, I have gone with a set, but when you set that up, then there's multiple reads that can come off of that based on what you would like to do and what the defense is giving you. So that's been an interesting one where if I go too close into a set, my feedback I get from the athletes is I'm too boxed in. I don't feel like I got any creativity. And then when I say, okay, well, you can do these options, or I give you your opportunity to do whatever you want, they go, well, what do? I need some direction. So there's this interesting balance that you've got to do between the two of them.
Yeah.
And right now, this crew wants more freedom. They understand the sets, but they want some freedom to be able to make some reads. And I'm all for it because these guys, I can trust them to make those right reads.
But that's the art of it, right? The science is what patterns you could run and what concepts. But then the art as a player is seeing the creativity and adjustments that you can make. And as a coach, allowing that to happen, creating an environment where that can happen instead of, I've been as a player a part of some programs where felt like the creativity was just sucked out of the room, and so I think that's impressive on your front that you have concepts or systems in place, but then encouraging and allowing them to have freedom when it works.
And coaches, we have to constantly keep reminding ourselves, we naturally are correctors We want to go out there and as soon as a read's wrong, you should have done it this way or whatever. But what we've got to do is we've got to celebrate people, the athletes challenging themselves and doing something new, because they're not going to continue to try it unless we try to, celebrate it. What gets praised gets repeated. And that's the biggest thing there, is seeing these guys go, well, I thought I might be able to do this. Cool, go try it one time. I want to see how it works. If it goes anywhere close to what they wanted to, celebrating the heck out of it and letting them know.
I think that's a huge difference maker right there. Gannon Baker was the guy that said we need to celebrate tries. And he said where he disagrees with Yoda, do or do not, there is no try. He said, I love Yoda, but he's wrong there. In our game, with the amount of mistakes that there are and the creativity that we want, celebrating the intentions behind what they were trying to do. I think you're right on the money there.
Yep. We get so many athletes that naturally want to say my bad when they make mistakes, but I really want to encourage athletes to start thinking about, I was trying something new and, that was a new one. That was a new one. Like getting a reminder of something out that way so they can encourage to do more. And I think that would also help your teammates understand what that read was. If I see some pass go flying out of bounds and I see a teammate go, I was trying something new. Of course, you want that at practice. You don't want that in the game.
We don't experiment in games.
Yes.
But that's the point. Yes. There's a nugget too. If we're not we don't want them to, I would say majority of coaches out there don't want players experimenting in games. Well, then when can they experiment? Yep. Like when are they allowed to try something, or as PGC would say, fall off the bike and get back on? I think it's too many of us are in practice, we're penalizing them for turnovers or defensive gambles, and we're making them do consequences for things. And then in games, they're also not doing those things. Like at what point, and it needs to be practice where they're allowed to do those things.
Yeah. One of the new things I'm just adding in this season is because we have 6:30 a.m. practices, many of the guys come to practice looking like they just rolled out of bed and they're just walking onto the floor. So what we've done is let them know that the first 10 minutes of practice is a 5-on-5 scrimmage. 10 minutes on the clock, go. No rules, restrictions. I'm not giving any feedback. I'm setting stuff up for practice and writing things down or whatever. They just go. And that 10 minutes, one, mentally prepares them that, we get to play. All right, I'm ready to go. And all of a sudden they wake up faster. But two, that's an opportunity that it doesn't matter. I can do whatever I want to do, and there's no consequence on it. There's no score on the scoreboard. There's just a running clock until we get into practice. And whatever's mistakes that have happened in that, no one really remembers, because that was just the warm-up, and now I'm into the next drill. But when something went well, they start talking about it, and they try to do it again later on in the practice. So it's a really good way of filtering while also bringing the energy up. And just a new thing that I was like, we got to spike the energy up early on in practice so we get more out of the first 20, 30 minutes of practice. And it's been working really well.
Coach, did you hear that from someone else, or is that just something you thought of?
Just something coming up with
That's really good. It's really good because Brian McCormick, he's just one of my favorite guys to follow on social media. I feel like he wrote the book Fake Fundamentals, which if anybody hasn't, it's an ebook. If anybody hasn't checked that out yet, like you need to listen to guys like that, because they challenge the things that we've been doing forever, like 3-man weave, or like he challenges those things. But he was talking about how for most coaches, 5-on-5 is the last thing that you do. And typically things early on in practice, all of the breakdown drills that we do again and again and again, they take more time. And then by the end, you're like, oh crap, I only have 5 minutes to scrimmage now. He says, and this is where I thought maybe he had to get this from Brian. He says to start that way, because I love the idea what you said. One, what's the most fun thing in basketball? It's competing, it's playing, and so start that way with what's most fun, get them going, have that time where you don't stop it. You're not critiquing. There's no winner or loser where they can really experiment. But then he said, judging from how it looked, that dictates the way they spend their time the rest of practice. Like, you know, and you're in 5-on-5 today, I felt like our pick and rolls, we were missing some things. So we're going to spend some more time on that. What that means, though, too, is we've got to give up our rigid practice plans, and it needs to maybe be a little more fluid throughout based on that time. But Coach, that's a great nugget there, man.
Yeah, it's an opportunity for them to run for a few minutes. And then once they get done with that game, again, we're not taking score or anything. I bring them over. And this year also is new for me. I've got a smaller whiteboard on some wheels that I can bring up to the sideline that has our focus for the day. And our theme for the season right now is sharpening the axe. And that when you're sharpening the axe, it's going to take a long time to put a really good edge on it. But that axe could be in terrible shape. But if you got the right sharp edge to it, it can chop down any tree you need to. And also the idea of Abraham Lincoln talking about if he had 6 hours to chop down a tree, to spend the first 4 sharpening his axe, we're going to do that work. And I've also used that as an opportunity for them to have confidence in my coaching, is that I'm going to be on you at practice about all the fundamentals and working really hard. But when we get in the game, y'all are just chopping down trees. And I'm here making sure that you're going after the right trees and you're just chopping trees down. And so that's kind of our focus, is sharpening the axe. And so every focus of practice is about how we do that. And are we honing the blade right now? And how important is the heel? And is our grip right, that we're going to be able to make sure that we're doing the right chopping, you know, getting all these small ideas of what sharpening an axe looks like. That's where we get to refocus on that right after that scrimmage. And then I get to say, so in that scrimmage, how do we do? Are we sharpening the axe? And they go, oh yeah, coach, we had really good passes there. You know what? We got to work better in our transition because we didn't have our heads up. We had a couple of plays, we kind of got some open layups out of it. So we get to reflect during that time and go, perfect. Glad we're engaged mentally and physically. We got the heart rate up. Now let's get into something competitive and get you moving.
Stealing that. Because it's a great idea, a way to communicate with your team. I am kind of getting around to the burn your goals mentality of Joshua Metcalf, and instead of having state championship on the board and then, you know, all those things, we're trying to really talk about the process. And I think that's what it is, because these weeks of practice leading up to our first scrimmages, leading up to our first games, and then our pre-district tournaments, all of those days and games leading up to the first district game. I mean, it's like you want to be able to tell the guys, these don't matter. I mean, as far as wins and losses, we can be 0 and whatever. We won't be, but we could be 0 and whatever before that first district game. It doesn't matter at that point. But if we're sharpening the axe every day, if we feel like we're moving forward, I love that analogy. And I think that's going to be something. And, man, how good does that look on a T-shirt too? I dig that, Coach.
Yeah. It just really comes down to, if you kept preaching about we're going to win a championship, or do we have the idea that I want you to play in games and it feel effortless? You just play ball and everything you do just seems so much easier. Every pass and every shot, every stop feels effortless because we've worked so hard at grinding that axe down to that very sharp edge. It's effortless going through. And so that's where we're going at. And then it comes down to them. Are you willing to put in the work daily and be reminded minute by minute that we have to keep grinding? And grinding sucks. Yeah. It's going to be hard sometimes, and you're not going to be really enjoying a lot of this stuff. But we know that it's pushing towards something else, and it's going to get better and easier every time we do it.
One of my favorite things to talk with coaches about is shooting. Yeah. And from mentality to how they train. What's one way that you teach, or how do you teach shooting in your program?
Mind-blowing idea was the videos and the information that I've heard a lot from some PGC coaches, and also Tyler Costin was talking a little bit about this too, was the idea of the toes facing the rim versus facing out, shooting away from your shooting hand. When I started to think about it more in the wheelchair aspect, we don't have the elevation in our shot, so we don't have the ability to corkscrew to open up the shoulder. That has to be done on the floor. And so a lot of the times we've had people teach in basketball to shoot in front. And when you are there and you're stuck with your chair and no rotation, the shoulders are super tight. And so what I've taught a lot of the guys to do is with a slight roll away from your shooting hand going toward the basket, if you've got your body turned out and you're squaring the shoulder, that shoulder, elbow, and hip all lined above the axle, which is the center of your big wheel, gives you power and alignment to give more elevation to your shot. So we've really worked on that. And then it's also about prepping our shooters with the chair positioning they need so they don't have to adjust. A shooter in able body catches a ball that they're not facing the basket. It's a simple pivot and you're ready to shoot. Wheelchair basketball, I catch it off balance. I've got to put the ball in a hand, waiter style, pull back on a wheel to adjust myself, now readjust.
That's time.
The defender's in your face.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so getting yourself adjusted in the right position, having those greedy fingers with the hands up, ready to go, catching and firing, now your pump fake is going to sell a defender and be able to get you to go and put it to the floor. So really prepping on those individual skills has really changed the way I've seen shooting. And it's also challenged the way that I learned shooting and start to think about with my former coaches.
Explain a pump fake and how that the advantages that it brings, because in my mind, like you said, with able-bodied basketball, it's getting that defender in the air to where then you can reattack. You mentioned multiple times that how since you're on the floor, what does that do for a player?
Yeah. So a lot of the times when we run into two-man games is we'll call a dive and a screener. So the dive basically is somebody that sits on the edge of the key, maybe on the first dash above the low block. So really mid post. And the second person is sitting probably 3 feet behind that person. And the two defenders are in front of that first dive. So they're playing the high and the low. If I'm sitting behind it, you're creating a screen for me, but it's a stationary screen for me to get an outside shot. If I receive the ball and I'm showing the pump fake and they flinch, I know their defensive read is they want to come out and defend me, but they're waiting to see if I'm going to shoot it.
Okay.
So now I can engage more into my shot. They come out and now I can run a pick and roll 2-on-1. If there's no flinch on my pump fake, I know that now they don't have time to come out. I can release my shot and take it down. So you're building confidence in shooters by making recognitions on defending reads.
Yeah, and that's the shot fake is more of not just necessarily making the defender choose, but it's really giving yourself time to see what they're doing. Yeah. And I see that. I see that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a unique opportunity with wheelchair ball that, you have those abilities to read chairs, and the chairs are going to react a little bit slower than somebody that would be running too. But once you get somebody to move just a little bit and you're able to get the proper positioning behind or in front of somebody, there's not much they can do. So it's a unique thing. I know Coach Neighbors was talking about it, and a lot of people talk about the idea of basketball being a game of chess, and that it's not a game of chess, which
it's
I
poker.
Agree. But for us, moving pieces around, we can actually, what we would say backpick, is that in transition, if there's a defender trying to get back on defense and an offensive player is able to get in front of them and stop their chair, you can actually eliminate a defensive player out of an entire possession and keep them in the backcourt. So if I've got two slow guys on defense and I'm attacking the other end, I might have two of my teammates go backpick him, which means just keeping them in the backcourt. And now I get to attack 3-on-3. And we know 3-on-3 in open space like that, you have a ton of opportunities. So it changes the game of where you're able to position people, and you can limit that way. The other thing with wheelchair ball is if somebody flips over in their chair, so they're upside down on it, if they're out of the action of the play and they can't get up on their own, they'll be left on the ground until the play returns toward them. So
the ref's not stopping it.
No. So if I got a guy in transition and I'm heading away and I give him a good bump and he flips over and he can't get up, we're going 5-on-4 the other way.
But is it a foul that just wasn't called or they didn't see it?
It depends on chair positioning. And it could be that he and I had really good chair positioning. He just happened to get up on my wheel and flipped him over.
Like an inadvertent flip. But chucking him out to the side. That's a foul, right? Or else.
Oh, yeah, for sure. All the physical contact. Yep. Thing about you is like somebody pushing and another guy in front of him. If I were to hit the brakes and he runs into the back of me, there's not a lot of a foul based on him, but I got control over his chair and somebody will flip over forward doing that. And then I take off and we're going to run that 5-on-4.
Yeah, 5-on-4 is for, but could be a long period of time.
Yeah. And then, so we know that when the ball or the possession is brought to them, it's a danger for them to be on the ground with wheelchairs rolling around.
Yes.
So the referee blows the whistle and stops it. But as long as they're out of the play, we can take advantage of that. So there's definitely time for people on the floor.
Forgive me for this question, but it's my ignorance in it.
Yeah.
Once they're flipped, they can't get back up themselves, like have to be helped back up?
It depends on the person. So
some can,
we train most of our athletes to be able to get up by themselves for that purpose.
Yeah.
If you flip over and you're my guy and you flipped over, I'm not trying to take a 5-on-4. You need to get up and get back in on defense. So a lot of our guys really know, because their chair is a part of their body. They've got multiple straps that's strapping them in, so they can do a big push up, throw their shoulders back, land on the wheels, and they're off and running again. Yeah.
That's kind of awesome.
Oh, it's so cool.
Yeah. Okay. Hand placement and power. Because that's something that I would imagine maybe hand placement is similar, but I was thinking about that because we do some shooting seated, and I try to get our guys to be able to move back farther and farther, because when you're young, you're told, and a lot of coaches will say, the power comes from your lower body. And I'm getting to the point where more and more I'm thinking it's a lot more upper body than anything else. And when maybe those two are in sync, the lower body's helping from distance, but early, closer around the 3-point line, I want my guys, in fact, to be able to shoot from seated position from the 3-point line where it is clean and straight through. But so that takes a lot of strength and power, and they have to have clean form. So how are you addressing that with your players?
So I think in a normal 12 to 15 feet away from the basket, our guys have the strength to be able to go in a normal form in the shooting pocket and release it. But outside of that, and the guys that are attempting threes, it's all about the dip and how far the dip can we get the ball to go into that. And I think in the past, maybe 5-6 years ago, it's been like, we got to eliminate the dip so we can get a faster shot off.
Wow. Yeah.
But the more that we see these guys shooting 3 balls in the NBA that have grabbed really serious dips into it, if you got the distance and the defender's not going to touch you, you might as well dip into it and give yourself the power so that your form is not at risk. Because that's the big thing is when we're struggling to put the ball up because we don't have the legs to do it, as soon as you start to push the shoulder into it, you start
it's like a shot put.
Shot put. Yeah. So really adding the dip to it. I've got some of the guys too that even within 12 feet will do a dip into it because it allows them to have more power. And I'm like, anything that gets you to shoot with more arc, I'm totally fine with, because shooting in wheelchair ball, you're so much lower that if you're going to shoot directly at the rim, you've got bricks all the time. You've got to have solid arc to it. And that's most of my feedback that I give for shooting. It's me sitting there with a broom in front of a guy, just being like, don't hit the broom, shoot above it, just shoot with arc. And as long as they're lobbing it, we got a better chance of putting that ball in.
Around the basket, are guys working on, maybe shooting outside of their body and using spin, almost like, kind of what some of these smaller guards in the NBA have to do?
Yeah. Interesting thing for bigs in the post is that you've obviously got 3 seconds in the key. But if you bring the ball above your head and your wrist is cocked in a shooting motion, 3 seconds stops for our bigs, and they get 5 seconds to be able to hold the ball in that position. So what you do then is you've got bigs that are able to adjust their body and their core to get away from defenders and get a clean shot. But if they remove the ball from the shooting pocket, so they bring their wrist back down, that's a 3-second call, and it's automatically.
Can they pass from up there?
No, it's got to be a shot.
Oh, so once they do this and that time starts, they can't go boop and dump it off. Okay.
Right. But because of that, they know that when they enter the key and they receive the ball, their first action is usually something low, a fake pass or a cross to engage the defender's arms down. And then they bring it up into the post where they now know that they have a few more seconds to settle themselves. And the defenders are coming up in action, hitting the arm as they shoot, and they're getting a post shot. So there's some strategy involved in there about your timing of what you've got. And then it's also using the chair. The chair is going to be a part of it that I want to use the front part of my chair that's the furthest distance from the defender and really get some separation. And what we'll train too is some fadeaway action. because with the chair, if you're able to get a push off of a defender, your chair will slowly fade backwards, which creates more space for the defender and allows you to release. So it is, as you are catching the ball, if you can push into a defender and they basically bounce off of them, you can get a slight fade away from the defenders and get into it. So yeah, small techniques on the post where it just gives them some more creativity.
What about offhand interference, thumbing it, pushing with two? Is that something you focus on? Or because I've kind of gone back and forth, even with younger players, definitely trying to get their thumb or their offhand from pushing and adding force to it. But older players, there's this whole idea of if it's not broke, don't fix it with shots sometimes.
Yeah. I think we're at a whole nother level when it comes to wheelchair ball, is that we have many athletes that come in and, in the lack of better words, their shot is broken. They did not do the skills they needed to, unfortunately, because the club programs they came from were not coached by coaches. They were coached by volunteer parents or whoever could do it. And so they were shooting just to get the ball to the rim. And so we got some kids that are, doing the two-handed shots, some doing the one-handed catapult launching type of shots. And you can see that it has really impacted their way of shooting. And now I've just kind of put some Band-Aids on it to go, like, how do we get the most out of this shot? So we'll have some guys that are still two-handed shooters. The one-handed cockback, I kind of got to kill that one, because that's more of a safety thing, is that if you're going back like that, you got a defender behind you and you get pulled back and get flipped over, you got a lot of problems that way. So it's a lot of manipulating that way, but we do definitely have players that use offhand thumb or offhand push for generating power, because they haven't had the power in the past. And hopefully we've done the right work in our strength and conditioning to build that, so then they can start to reduce that offhand shooting and work on the power.
That's a good point. That's a good point of your strength and conditioning, because there's always this idea with with basketball players, they don't need the weight room. I think we are far beyond that now. That everybody sees the value in it and what it can do for your game. But that's another, if you do have some of these higher skilled players that do shoot it really well, why do I even need the weight room? Well, because the increase in strength will enhance your ability, what you already can do. I think that might be another way to tie in the importance of the weight room to players.
Yeah, it's important for the athletes to understand too that the weight room is not about getting big. That's a good thing that's involved in it. But for us, explosiveness is a big one. And a lot of the things that we do in the lifting gym is explosive. If we're on the bench, a lot of times our bench is a explosive push and then a slow retreat down, another explosive push to replicate our pushing. And then flexibility is a big one. We always do flexibility exercises in with our lifting. So these guys are doing a lot of window washing on a wall, really stretching out their shoulders and getting extra work in. And, we got guys that are putting up big weights. And then the next exercise, they've got 2-pounders doing full and empty cans. And you can see them sweating and shaking because they got these 2-pounders that they're extending out. And it's not about the weight and about the size. It's about what you can do that empowers you to be better on court.
Coaches, the Jamodi podcast is powered by Shoot 360. The future of basketball has arrived in Dallas-Fort Worth. Shoot 360 combines the latest sports technology with the fundamentals of basketball skill development. The result is a one-of-a-kind video game-like basketball program designed to improve your shooting, dribbling, and passing. Visit shoot360dfw.com to learn more and register for your free 1-hour workout evaluation. Shoot 360, the future of basketball is here. Since meeting you and following you on social media, I've seen how intentional you are with your social media platforms. I can't remember what podcast I was listening to. It was 2008 or 9, I think. But he said, if you're a coach and you're not using social media to enhance your program, then you're behind. And as a competitor, I don't want to be behind in anything. And so I took that to heart. How do you use social media to enhance your program?
Yeah. So for me, I had to learn Photoshop. And it was something maybe 3 or 4 years in. We don't have the extra staff to be like a social media coordinator or anything else like that. But I knew that our athletic department was coming out with some really great stuff. And there's got to be some way of doing it. So I truly got Photoshop and just started to play around with it and with different ideas. And when I look back at my first images to what I have now, there's been some major changes when it comes to that. But the importance is that I think the athletes feel more like athletes when they're represented on social media as athletes. And when they also, for our athletes being as similar to our able-bodied counterparts, that makes a huge difference. And I also think it's expanding our ability to represent our game better by putting more into what it looks like, because Instagram is really the platform that everybody is connecting with that way.
Yeah.
The other side of it is instruction and how we virtually give instruction. For my athletes, I love doing PDFs and videos that show different things that we might be working on in practices. It's way easier to draw out a play of what we're going to do and send that virtually first so they get a perspective, and then we can break it down further when we get into practice, especially something that's very rare and new that we want to get going. And then the instructional work that we really built on during COVID for our summer camps, that we ran some virtual camps here through the university that we got to teach, and we got to interact with coaches and players around the world that play wheelchair basketball to understand that our program being a great foundation for fundamental skills, we got to teach those to the world. So I'm always learning, and I always feel that I'm behind as well. But it's good to interact with the youth and ask them what is good, what's coming up next. And understanding too that we always will see the next thing and go, oh, I don't want to be a part of that. And the unfortunate side is as soon as we get that feeling, we're already past, we're already done. The idea of right now is with TikTok, right? Like TikTok is the way people are interacting on there. And how great would it be if a quick TikTok video gave instruction and showed more about your program to the community and to your athletes. So that's the path we're going after.
Some light bulb moments there for me. Sure. The first one, I've been using social media a ton, and I've always, with our program, looked at the branding aspect. Like, this is a free way to let people know the amazing things that we're doing in our program and to celebrate the players. I never thought about, though, the players themselves viewing our program as like they're even more invested, more a part of it. It's even more important to them because of what we do. I knew they'd like it, but I didn't look at it that type of maybe buy-in that we might be getting by using that. So that was an interesting nugget there.
It really came full circle for me when I started to get really good with the Photoshop, and we had our team photographer doing a media day where we could take photos of the athletes in different poses so I could use them for graphics in the future. And the athletes were always like, can I get the photos? Can I get the photos? And I was like, no, I'm going to use them for editing throughout the season. I don't want you just throwing them out there. And over the last 2 years, we just decided, you know what, let's just give them to the athletes and let them share them. And they've been so much more engaged, and they've been sharing them out to the community, and they really understand the impact of what those are, that it's just like it's necessary now for them to get them those images and let them use them, because it's an identity thing. Yeah. We have our personal identity in front of people, and we also have our virtual identity, and that has something that gives them a positive confidence.
And I never thought about asking my players, what are some things that we should be doing on social media?
Yeah.
Like all these old coaches before me, or I've just decided this is what we're doing, and you like it, players. You enjoy it, you share it. But what if there's something out there that, I try to watch programs like Baylor, and when they do a get to know, like this year, I'm going to experiment with get to know your player videos instead of just the photo, because Baylor did this really cool thing with their player. They would have the question at the bottom and their answer, and they're kind of like in this dark room, and why not use video for that? And but man, that was a good point of they know way more than we do, and kudos to you for having the ability of, I don't like this at all. It doesn't make sense. It's dumb to me. Oh man, we should have already been doing it. That's a good point.
It's important to them, right? It's not about what's important to you. It's what's important to them and what we can give to them. And it's fun to see the unique things that they come up with and they may see, and starting to filter that as well. One of the exciting things that I'm looking forward to doing with the athletes is another team building exercise. Is I want to know what's going on and what they think about themselves and what they are putting in their own head when it comes to social media. And one of the things that you do on Instagram is that if you just go to a random search and you click one of the videos and you just start flipping, it's already has an algorithm that's gone based on what you've seen in the past and what you normally look at. And I'm interested to see if the athletes are willing to flip through 10 random videos to see what their algorithm is compared to ours. Because mine is all about basketball instruction and motivation and all this.
Yeah.
And I would love to see what's getting pumped into their head every day when they're flipping through, and how is that impacting them. And I want to see if there's some similarities, what happens there, because whether we like it or not, social media impacts our athletes every day. And it would be great if we taught them the skills to be able to handle those before it becomes a negative thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think Adam Bradley with Lead 'em Up, he said that every day when his kids get home, he feels like he has to bring them back because they're just being influenced, not just by people that they're in front of, but if they do have that device and those algorithms, yeah, they, without even realizing it, they're getting indoctrinated into all types of things. And he felt like that he needed to do that. I think as coaches, we can help our players maybe to stay away from some of the negative self-image aspects of social media and use it for what it could be, what you and I use it for, which is an incredible way to learn and to connect and to grow. But maybe that comes with age too. The fact that we see, I mean, I don't know about you. I am thankful that Facebook came to Baylor my senior year.
Yep.
And we were in the Student Life Center, and I'm out, all these people around the community computers back in the day that you could go use. And they're like, come here, you got to set up your profile. I'm like, what is it? Like, it's Facebook, the Facebook. And I'm like, whatever. And, but thankfully it wasn't around then, because it's just hard. It's difficult now. And that's a great way, Coach, for us to be, without being too intrusive, more involved with them.
If you're creating a platform and your identity on a platform and you show them what it should look like and what you believe it should look like, you're giving them a good example. Us not having a profile on a platform shows them that they can do whatever they want. And I think it's really important for us to show what a positive view of being on social media looks like. And how great would that be is if you put in the work to show them what it is, rather than getting on theirs going, you shouldn't have this on there and you shouldn't have that on there. I think it's important to take the lead that way.
How big is the platforms of players you're recruiting? How important is that? Like, do you look through that? Because I've heard a lot of coaches say that, they will not recruit a player based on some things that they find in their feeds or in their profiles.
Yeah. Most of the early conversation I have with recruits is through Instagram, because that's the easiest way for them to try to communicate with me. It's like their version of texting, but without text. But yeah, it's a big one, is to see what they're posting and what they're kind of sharing out to the world. And it also is really interesting how Facebook is dying off when it comes to that, is that I used to be able to interact with them on Facebook as well, but many of them have no Facebook profile at all. It's just Instagram and something else. And it's now interacting with the parents via Facebook and interacting with the kids via Instagram or something else. Yeah, interesting transition. And I'm interested to see what happens next and see what the next one is. I don't know if you're Be Real is a new app that they have now, which apparently is an app that notifies you once a day that you've got to take a photo at that moment. It has a certain time frame, and you've got to be real and show you exactly what you're doing at that moment. And it's a selfie cam and a front facing or a back facing cam at the same time, and that's when you take the photo. And so it's their opportunity to show at any time during the day, I've got to show you what I'm doing and sharing at that moment. I don't understand it yet, but it's something that I've got to understand, because I know that it's going to be something that's going to be moving forward.
I've never heard of that before.
Yeah.
You and I, we might be getting real really quick, because again, it's a really good point that you said. the fact that I'm just now hearing about it, I'm probably really behind.
Yeah.
I'm probably behind.
If we think it's really cool and we join it before they do, then it's not cool anymore.
We'll drown it out before. Yes. That's it, coaches. If you don't want something to happen, just get on it, act like it's really cool, and we'll tear it apart.
Tell your kids about it, that how cool it is to be on Be Real. I've got a great story on Be Real. They're like, no, coach, that's not it. I don't want that anymore. Yeah.
All the investors in Be Real are like, we need to get these adults, these coaches off of this thing. They're killing us right now.
There's going to be an age limit immediately.
That's right. All right, coach, the speed round. Okay. This is how we get to know. We know about your coaching and your basketball stuff, but now the real important things. You ready?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Favorite ice cream flavor?
Ben and Jerry's fish food. It's good. Solid. It's got a little bit of everything in it. I'm a chocolate freak. I love chocolate, so something that's got chocolate in there, solid. Yeah.
How many hours of sleep do you get versus how much you need?
So with 6:30 practices, it's kind of early. I shoot for 8, and I usually get 6 to 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I would imagine. I mean, you're probably getting up. Jocko, the former Navy SEAL, one I love is his energy drinks. They've got a small amount of caffeine, but the ingredient list is only like 3 or 4 things instead of the paragraph of things you can't even pronounce anyway. But I follow. Yeah. I love him. But he, I follow him on social media. He gets up around 4:30 every day, and he posts a picture. He'll probably be reeling it for sure at 4:30 every day, but posts a picture with the date and time. But I'm assuming you're getting up pretty early.
Yeah, and I want to be there before the athletes, make sure the gym's good to go too. So yeah, I'm there pretty early, and it's just it's a long day. We go from 6:30 in the morning till I'm usually here 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. So it's long days, but we make it work. Yeah.
Best basketball movie of all time?
I'm a 90s kid, so I'm gonna go Space Jam.
Nice. Okay. Thoughts on Space Jam 2?
I didn't see it, don't want to see it, not very interested in it.
That's how I felt too.
Don't ruin a classic.
They did. They did. I like LeBron, but it made me appreciate how great of an actor Michael Jordan was.
Wow. That's saying a lot too.
Okay, tell me the shot clock in wheelchair basketball. What's the shot clock situation?
It's 30-second shot clock for our guys. Yeah, and that's the college shot clock. When we go to the adult, like D1, they go to 24, but our college side is 30.
Okay. So this is, I mean, just in your opinion, because in Texas, we don't have a shot clock for high schools. For high schools, shot clock or no shot clock? What do you think?
Definitely shot clock. Yeah. Anything that can prepare them to go to the next level. I mean, that's our hard part for us, is that we have a classification system for wheelchair basketball where you are evaluated based on your physical ability. And for college ball, with your number from 1.0 to 4.5 on a 0.5 scale, we're only allowed to play 14 points between the 5 people on the floor. And so you have to do some quick math to figure out who you can play. And that being set aside, our high school kids don't get classifications. They're in what they call a J1, J2. So you're either in the J1, which is the lower classification, or J2 higher. So we're pushing the juniors and the high school kids to go, hey, let's get them classified too. So the one, they understand what their class is. And then 2, we know. So when I recruit a kid, I'm not guessing what their number is going to be until they get here and I go, oh no, they are a different number than what they thought they were.
Who establishes what their number is?
Yeah, we have certified classifiers that are people that get trained to evaluate what it looks like and what things that people can do for different ability levels. And we evaluate them that way. So your 1-1-5s are people that are, from the chest down, have very little balance, and they struggle in all different planes. 2s have a little bit more than those 1s do. 3s, like myself, have pretty much all core, but struggle outside a certain level. And then your 4s are people that basically have no disability or might have an amputation or something. And like I said, you can only play 14 points. So I can't play a bunch of fours where I'm over points. It's basically our anti kickball rule where you get the scrawny kid always gets picked last. We can't have that because that disability, they didn't have a chance to, not be that person. So now somebody that is a low point player that is decent at passing the ball or shooting become one of the most powerful and great players on the court.
Yeah. My first thought was, okay, this basically keeps Alabama football from ever happening, right? Because they have all the best talent at every position. All of their players are 4.5s at their positions, but they're all out there. Yeah. So it stops that. But then I would imagine too, it has to do a lot with your philosophy of how you want to play.
Yeah.
Because you're going to make sure if you were going to run everything through the post, you would want to have that 4.5 there, and you could afford it. If you wanted more speed and then I'm guessing, but is that kind of right on the money?
100% on it. Yeah, you're 100% on it. So if we wanted we wanted to play bigs in the post, our littles and our low pointer players need to be people that can handle the ball and can give it up into the post and pass it. Or you go the flip side, which we would call tweeners, which would be 2s and 3s. You could spread out and have several in the 3s and 2s across the board, and they all could be really fast with mediocre kind of balance ability, and you just run on people and you go with the transition game.
I love that. I love that because you nailed it. The 1.5s that are really skilled.
Yeah.
They are so valuable because they allow for more higher level players to be around them. But like with your kickball analogy, because you could go 2 4.5s and 3 little ones, but but if they can't hoop, then.
And sometimes teams do that where they'll take 2 really strong 4s, play them, and the other 3 are just guys getting in the way and just causing problems and picking and doing stuff. And for us, we look at that from the outside view and go, oh, that's kind of unfortunate that you don't allow them to really play and get better. But there's some international teams that will play that way where they'll play 2 bigs, 2 little class 1s, and somebody that can handle the ball. And they just say, bigs, attack the key and just go after them. And if you don't have any bigs on the floor to bounce with them, I can't jump up and block a big.
That's right.
I'm stuck in my chair. So if a big gets close to the hoop, I'm just waving at him as he shoots that ball over top of me.
How big is because I was talking with a player the other day. He sent me a photo of some JUCO players and kind of was like, why aren't they Division I players? And it was just a photo. I couldn't tell, but I was like, most likely they're not that tall. There's some physical abilities. Sometimes though, it is skill. Sometimes it's grade. Sometimes it's other things. But like that. The biggest difference when I go to a Division I game, and sometimes I forget how big they were, when I was out there, but how big is the athletic attributes, the wingspan, the height, things like that in wheelchair basketball?
Yeah, I think with every sport, there's variations of it.
Yeah.
But it also depends on the disability. So you have some kids that are born with their disability that may have an impact to what their length and their body structure is, but others you have that are late injuries. And we'll have people that come in that played able-bodied ball their whole life and then maybe had a car accident when they were 19 and now they're getting into wheelchair ball. And what's really interesting is the unique aspects of able-bodied players injured late is their court awareness and their ability to pass. And it's very interesting that both of those items come with able-bodied players that were injured late got the opportunity to do more free play than those that were born with a disability and had to be in adaptive sports immediately.
Wow.
You see that interesting break that's in between those. And we push our junior coaches all the time of you've got to give them an opportunity to have a lot of free play. Because you imagine you and all your kids have been using small ball sports probably all their lives, as baseball or hockey or something like that. For us, for adaptive sports, you usually get one sport you like and you stick with that. And a lot of it is either basketball or track. And so you don't get access to small ball skills and that hand-eye coordination.
Wow.
So there's a lot of that extra stuff that gets into the sport that just you wouldn't think that would be some impact.
This is the longest speed run I've ever had, but it's really good. I'm not.
All right.
Texting or talking?
Texting on the phone, talking in person. Does that work?
Like texting on the phone. Yeah.
Texting if I'm using my phone rather than a FaceTime or calling somebody. But if I'm in person, if I have the opportunity to be in person, I want to talk.
Nice. That makes sense.
Text. Yeah.
Favorite holiday?
Thanksgiving. Opportunity to get everybody back together. And it's interesting that for us, for wheelchair ball, Thanksgiving break for us usually happens. And so that's something that we get to experience. For Christmas break, it's usually like you got it, and then we're moving in, we're getting ready to go. Our guys are back on campus right after New Year's, so we can start getting some 2-a-day training going. So Christmas just feels like a whirlwind, and then we're right back into the sport.
I like that.
Yeah.
In basketball, who is the GOAT?
Michael Jordan. Yeah.
I knew I liked you.
Now, I grew up in Detroit, about an hour north of Detroit. And so I was a big Detroit fan. And growing up, I was the bad boy era when I was a kid. So Isaiah Thomas is also right there. And I was very fortunate that I got to visit the Basketball Hall of Fame because the guy that created our program was being honored there.
Oh, awesome.
And I got to meet Isaiah and get a photo with him. And I was like, that was the moment I got to see a celebrity and I lost words and was just like, sir, can I get a photo? I lost
Should he have been on the 92 Dream Team?
We'll never know.
If Jordan hadn't kept him out.
Yep, Jordan, yeah.
Favorite place to travel?
Japan, Tokyo. Yeah, I've been very fortunate to be able to travel several times there and run wheelchair basketball camps in Tokyo.
That's cool.
Yeah, big group over there. So I love Tokyo. That's my favorite place.
2 more. How many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
No coffee. Never had a full cup of coffee.
Yep. All right.
I know, but it's weird though. It's hard because that's a great bonding experience and being like with another coach, hey, let's go get a cup of coffee and do it. So it's kind of an awkward moment.
No, but it's not a big caffeine guy.
Like that. I mean, if I need it, I'll find it from somewhere, whether it's with an energy drink or a soda or something like that. But coffee is just not it for me.
That's fair. Last one. Godfather, Star Wars, or neither?
Neither.
Interesting. What's your favorite genre to go to?
It's comedy.
Nice.
It's comedy. I'm a sucker for a dumb Will Ferrell movie. And I love the laugh.
That's awesome. Well, Coach, this has been so much fun, man. I felt like it's just an extension of the conversation we had at the PGC retreat. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and talking hoops with me. It was a blast.
Matt, I really appreciate it. It was exciting. And this also gets me excited too, because I want to get into this space as well for our wheelchair basketball community. So if anybody's interested in that, the next step that I'm taking outside of Illinois basketball is working on a program for developing wheelchair basketball called Axel the Caster Basketball. So if anyone's interested in that, Axel the Caster Basketball will be the thing to find on social media. Be really cool if I get some people to check that out.
Love that. And just in case anybody does want to reach out to you for any reason, what's the best way?
Yeah, they can find us on our social media. It's Illini, Illini WCBB, which is wheelchair basketball. Or they can just find me, Coach Buchi, on any of the social media sites. That's Coach Buchi, Buchi.
Coach, this is one of my favorite conversations. And you gave me so much time. Just really appreciate everything about you, what you're doing. It's awesome, man.
That's what it's all about, sharing the light, man. I love it.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the Jamodi podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.